wow, Ron DeSantis is actually going to be a war criminal before he's president. Wow, that's impressive. Just listen to a segment by Kyle Kulinski discussing a podcast that Abby Martin and her husband, Mike Prisner, host called The Empire Files, in which he interviewed a former Guantanamo Bay detainee recounting DeSantis directly overseeing the torture of inmates there and even laughing at the acts being committed against them. He made an astute point that if Ron DeSantis wins, he will be the only candidate to be a war criminal before taking the president's seat. I shared that Empire Files thing in here, I believe, in the Patreon. And I remember thinking like, wow, Ron DeSantis is actually going to be a war criminal before he's president. Wow, that's impressive. Like that's the first thing that came to my mind. And Kyle came to the same conclusion.
What went down with Ron DeSantis overlooking it?
It was Ron DeSantis.
Yes, exactly. The person.
He said, "I'm here to ensure you're being treated humanely."
Yes, exactly. And if you have any problems, if you have any concerns, just talk to me. And we were drowning at that place. I'm like, oh, this is cool. That person actually writing something. He will raise the concerns, but it was piece of the game. What they were doing, they were looking what's hurt you more to use it against you. By the end of 2005, 2006, when he was there, one of the worst time at Guantanamo, literally. We were crying, screaming. We were tied to the feeding chair. And that guy, he was watching that, he was laughing, basically. It was hurt like hell. And I was screaming, like, when I was screaming, I look at him. And he was actually smiling, like, as someone who enjoying it. When they used to feed us, because our stomach cannot hold this amount of insure. They used to pour insure one can after another. So when he approached me, I said, this is the way we are treated. You should start to eat. I threw up in his face, literally on his face.
Ron DeSantis.
In his face, yeah. We were beating all day long, all day. There's a team. Whatever you do, they just beat you. Pepper spray, beating, sleep deprivation, that continued for 3 months. And he was there because at the beginning, he told us that he was there to ensure we are treated humanely. And if we have concern or issues, he will take it. But he's one of the people who actually supervised the torture, the abuses, the beating all the time at Guantanamo.
So you're saying that DeSantis initially, because he presented himself as the lawyer whose job it was to ensure you were being treated humanely, then you and other detainees told him the things that were the hardest for you to deal with, the things that you felt needed to change. And then instead of actually making sure those things changed and that your human rights are respected, he then basically was gathering intelligence to then tell the prison camp and the interrogators what it was that was impacting you most so they could do it more to you.
Exactly. That what happened there. This guy is torturer, is a criminal.
Okay, so we got there 500 people at Guantanamo, hunger striking. Ron DeSantis comes in to make sure they're treated humanely. Apparently, that's not what he did. And it's actually kind of funny, not funny, haha, but funny that I actually know exactly what he did. I used to do the same thing, not at Guantanamo Bay, but with pledges when I was in a fraternity. You create a system where pledges can't win. I was like, hey man, whatever you guys need, I won't tell anybody. Let me know. You want to, if you need some cigarettes, you need some booze, whatever, you have a party, you need anything, just let me know, right? And so they would come to me with what they needed something. I was like the good guy until the last couple weeks. And then I would take all that information that I'd compiled. And at that point, they're kind of mentally and physically kind of exhausted. And you could just with them. And it was really fun. So I would go from the nice guy to a complete piece of shit. But that seems to be the role that DeSantis played, except he was involved in torture, right? So that means Ensure, right, which is that liquid meal replacement for old folks, mixed with laxatives being force-fed through prisoners' noses at Guantanamo Bay. And here's the thing about Guantanamo Bay that's funny. The way that Obama would have put it was oh, these are high-level criminals down here that are being interrogated for terrorism. It's these are just people that Saudi Arabia didn't like, that they sent to Guantanamo Bay to deflect from their own culpability in 9/11. Maybe past culpability, we'll see, but we'll probably never see actually. But they're involved. Saudi Arabia's involvement in 9/11. Don't call me a truther here, but it's a little bit fishy. We call our allies who are involved in 9/11 and say, hey, we need some people that you think might be Taliban or whatever, and they're like, yeah, sure, we'll send those, and they just sent randos. So a lot of these people weren't even guilty of anything besides looking like what we think a terrorist is. So a lot of these are innocent people. So that is, by definition, a war crime. Now, it's kind of, to me, it's if you're tasked with torturing people, that's one thing. If your job is to make sure that their human rights are respected and you partake in the torture, that's even worse to me. Kyle goes on to say something that I agree with here, in that when it comes to war crimes and the war crimes of the United States, mainstream media doesn't want to pick that up. That's inconvenient. They lose access to people that they need in the intelligence community, within the military. They need access access to these people, so they don't want to bring that up because they don't want to expose what's going on at Guantanamo, right? They don't want to lose access. So what is this going to do about his popularity? Nothing. I'll know. Like this is like this very. If he doesn't address this, I'm very unlikely to vote for Ron DeSantis. Like if it just goes on, he just does what he's doing now and like it doesn't get brought up. And even worse, if he does get brought up and he deflects on it, I'm not interested. Right? Because what that list says to me is like, oh, we're about to have another like a George W. Bush with a better COVID policy. That's what I see. Right? Because I don't really know shit about DeSantis besides like COVID response. That was his claim to fame. I don't know enough about him to vote for him. Like, that's where I'm at. But that's not going to change anything, right? Now I'm in a purple state, so my vote does matter. And it's really interesting to like look at this whole thing. I just don't think it's not going to impact his popularity because the mainstream media just doesn't want to pick this up. And it's not like people are out here seeking this stuff out unless somehow Abby gets her hooks in somewhere and maybe goes on Tucker Carlson. But can you imagine Tucker Carlson, right? Because Fox News has already picked DeSantis as their candidate in 2024. They can't cover this. Tucker could cover this. Greenwald is going to cover this, I'm sure. Taibbi will cover it. Like these guys, Kyle, a bunch of people on the left will. But whenever you're someone like David Pakman, for example, who seems to think that the Twitter pages, the Twitter document leak is like no big deal, who the cares what you have to say about Ron DeSantis? Do you think any of your listeners were going to vote for Ron DeSantis, David Pakman? Even Kalinske, it's like, yeah, you're preaching to the choir. They weren't going to vote for him anyways. You think you're changing anybody's mind? No, they just don't like him more now. It changes my mind. It probably changed people's mind in this Patreon, right? In the community here, unless he brings it up and addresses it. I'm like indifferent on him now.